Here. So Hashem, time. Okay. So Hashem, close that. Okay. Chat. Okay. Okay. Where are we? Okay. Let's start. Okay. Today I was sent an article by a friend that very interesting article, very actually a very exciting type of an idea until I started reading it a bit more. Still very exciting after I kept reading it, but it was a little of a downer when I saw some of the details. Basically, that it was talking about a Syrian community in New York that collectively purchased two brand new towers that are going up or have been, I think they're going up. There's Hashem, $1 billion shekel deal. The contractor must be extremely happy, especially since apparently there's a slump in real estate. And they plan to move here, or at least they bought it as a community. And that's amazing. I mean, that's two huge towers. It's kind of hard to be neighbors and friends and all that, but nonetheless, the idea is the idea. Then he went on to the article and it talked about how that they're not necessarily moving here at this point in time. Some have, kids in the army or, learning here or living here, and they want a place. But it did mention, that this was inspired also partly to do with the fact that there's a wave of anti-Semitism. But they are worried that maybe ghost apartments might sit vacant or just be rented out. But it's an amazing thing. It's an important step. There's no denying that this is a significant act of a whole community. And the last time I heard of such a thing like that was from downtown New York. I think Rifkin, his community moved. A lot of people moved together to Frat, and as a community, which is also an amazing thing. Smaller amounts, but this is like really a huge project and it made headlines. But then to find out that they're not so moving here, that kind of like put a little bit of damper on it. But you never know, But they wanted a place to run because, as it mentioned, a wave of anti-Semitism. And things. It depends on your perspective, depends on what you think and how you look at things. Different things affect people differently, and the entire article, the part about not moving here right now, of course, that was, that got to me, right? But the part that it mentioned a wave of anti-Semitism. Yeah, and at first I didn't think, I didn't quite catch what it was that bothered me about it. But the more I thought about it, the more I began to realize that it sounds like, like a wave, it comes and goes, it comes and goes. There's another time in history when we're going through difficult times and anti-Semitism is rising once again. And but it's going to go away. It's going to go away. Just like, for example, the Holocaust was the Holocaust, and it's kind of hard to say we survived it because the only reason why people survived, I mean, they were Europeans, of course, who did survive it. There's no question about that. But a lot of it has to do with the fact that the people were not even Europe, and Americans and Jews living elsewhere in the world weren't a part of it directly. So yeah, that's calling it surviving because Baruch Hu was kind enough to spread us around the world, as Rashi brings down in Chumash, that we should not be so vulnerable to be destroyed all at one time or at all, for that matter. But we're here. I mean, the Holocaust came and it lasted for about 3 years and really started before the 1938 and continued on even after the Holocaust. I mean, Poland had one of the highest rates of anti-Semitism post World War II, and the Jews hadn't even come back yet, which is like mind-boggling. But we went through a good period of time for the most part. I mean, Russia, not so, because the Jews were kept there against their will, and they were mistreated unless they completely abandoned everything Jewish, became completely communist, and went into the system and dropped everything Jewish. But if you wanted to maintain any kind of Judaism whatsoever, so then you were vilified in a pariah society. But in the Western world, Baruch Hashem, the 1950s, 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, it was very pleasant, and it seemed as if anti-Semitism had withered away for the most part in the Western world. But here it's back, right? So it comes and goes, like ebbs and what's the other word? The ebbs and I always forget that, but it's like it comes and goes. That's waxes and wanes, just like the moon, so to speak. And that's not true. I mean, it's true, but it's not true. It's not. It's true in as much as there's been periods where it's more intense, and periods of time where it's less intense. But it's not simply a racism, right? Racism usually is based upon differences, physical differences for the most part, sometimes cultural differences, but differences. And it's been shown and proven, and we know firsthand that even the most assimilated Jews who gave up everything. I mean, Hitler, Yamashma V'Zechro, he didn't care whether you became a completely loyal German citizen and gave your entire life to the Reich. He didn't care about that. If you had Jewish ancestry, you were taken. And even what we don't even call it Jewish halakhically, what they call a half Jew, he took that too, took them also in the end. So it's not like normal racism. And this is what the Gemara says. The Gemara says that Mount Sinai was called Sinai, the different options, different answers given as to why it was called Har Sinai. And in the end, the Gemara concludes and says, because it's the place from which Sina originated, right? That the hatred of the Jewish people originated. And there's different explanations to what that actually means, but it means that we officially became the Jewish people. And once we did, basically, then we were on a different level of existence, a different level of hashgacha pratis, a different level of reality that's going to include anti-Semitism, because now the dialogue is official. Because that's what anti-Semitism is. It's a dialogue between the Baruch and the Jewish people. It's not based upon natural causes. Halachahi, Esav son es Yaakov, Lu Yaakov, Esav son Lu Yaakov, right? The Sifrei says, right? Meaning that it's built into the world because we are the Jewish people. So it's not a wave. It's not a wave like it's something like racism, where if the economy is down and people are looking for scapegoats just because they need them to survive the situation, so they pick on minorities as a reason for their suffering. That might be a wave, but anti-Semitism, we could be the greatest contributors to society, and still they come after us in the end, because it's a dialogue between the Kodesh Baruch Hu and the Jewish people. So if it's rising, it's not going to go away until it does what it's here to do. So when you hear the word pogrom, right? What comes to your mind? So what comes to my mind basically is that you imagine angry mob of Gentiles about 200 years ago, let's say, going through the streets of some shtetl, some town, right, with clubs in hand and rakes or whatever they have to do damage and to kill and to murder, and to steal whatever they can, and with torches and a real scary reality, and then doing terrible damage to Jewish people. That's what you think of pogrom, a whole crowd of people, a mob, an angry mob, a mob scene, a mob mentality, right? That's what you think about a pogrom. And when it happened, you didn't look at it wasn't usually for geopolitical reasons. It wasn't because there was a cause. It was just unbridled hatred of the Jewish people. And we knew that. And they knew that. They could blame it on the fact that we didn't become Christians and didn't accept their way of life and all that. But for the most part, that was just simply a way of justifying and rationalizing the hatred and the jealousy, whatever they had inside that was driving them. And we had to live with it, or move someplace else where perhaps it was safer if we survived it in the end. But when you think of terrorist attack, right? You hear the word terrorist attack, all of a sudden it's a little bit different. Even though from our perspective, a terrorist attack is not justified, and we look at it as they've done the wrong thing, somehow by saying a terrorist attack, there's a certain level of legitimization that takes place in people's minds. I mean, look what happened on October 7th. That's a terrorist attack. That's what they call it, a terrorist attack. And they come and they do what they did, and the whole world should have said that's wrong, what you did is terrible, right? And never supported them the entire war. I mean, it's a war we didn't start. It's a war we didn't want. We weren't putting any pressure on them. We would love them to become successful in business and develop themselves into a reliable, trustworthy country on their own. And eventually, if they were to go down that route, more than likely, once they earned that trust, they earned the trust of the Israelis and the trust of the rest of the world, then they would become like everybody else, except in the UN, the whole thing. But that's not the way they do. They don't work that way. Even if they have the opportunity, they don't work that way. And so why is the world supporting them? Because there's some geopolitical reason for what they're doing. They want the land. The Israelis will give them, their independence, even though they haven't deserved it. They haven't earned it. And if we gave them the land, they got the land. They weren't. Hamas wasn't even supposed to be in power in Gush Katif. We destroyed our own hard work and destroyed families to give them a piece of land they could have developed into a tourist resort easily, more than any other place in the world. They had the resources, everything they needed to be successful, and this should never have taken place. But they went the other way instead, because that's who they are. That's what they do. That's how they live. That's their mentality, right? They don't even know what peace is. There's a reason why the Jordanians kicked them out of Jordan. Their own people, their own brothers, because it's a mentality. The world doesn't get it. The world doesn't understand it. Instead, they say the reason why they're doing this is because Israel won't give them their independence and their states and give them their chance to stand on their own 2 feet. So therefore, they're attacking you. And yes, they did some terrible, horrific things that were really barbaric, but we're gonna overlook that because, after all, the main reason they're doing this is for some reason. It's not just hatred. It is, but that's because it's called a terrorist attack. October 7th. Australia 2 weeks ago, terrorist attack. No, a pogrom. A pogrom. That's what it is, a pogrom. Call it a terrorist attack if you want to, but it's a pogrom. Unbridled, unreasonable hatred of the Jewish people disguised in politics and demands. Why don't we see it that way? Because we're used to different things. Because in the past, when we read about the pogroms, Chmielnicki pogroms, for example, or any of the crusades that the Christians went on, it was a lot of people with old-fashioned weapons going on, marches through the streets of the Jewish people and doing terrible, horrific, the same things, by the way, the same things that they did to us, if not worse, if not better, right? But the same thing. But today, a father and son can go by themselves. They can take a machine gun, they can kill several people in a matter of seconds and wound 40 people just like that and call it a terrorist attack. But that's a pogrom. The fact that it only takes 2 people to do, because in the old days, if you wanted to do damage, you had to have a lot of people. 1 or 2 people couldn't do that much damage. How much damage can you do with a rake? You get light up with a torch, you could light buildings on fire, but you probably wouldn't get very far if there's just 2 of you. When there's 10 of you, there's 20 of you, there's 100 of you. So then you can do a lot of damage. And also you need to be protected. Because it's just 2 of you going in there, then the Jews can fight back and protect themselves and beat you up and maybe even kill you in the process. But you go to 100 angry people, then you're basically protected and you can do so much damage and they're going to be scared, not you. But today you don't need that anymore. As a result of modern day technology, you can carry a pogrom, one guy, one person. I mean, it's mind-boggling when you think about how easy it is to do this. You can go online and see how many concerns are about this. But one person could walk up to the White House, close enough. You don't have to go so close, far enough away the cameras won't see you, the police won't see you, with a briefcase and a dirty bomb inside. And with that dirty bomb, he can take out 9 million people in a matter of seconds. 9 million people. But not just take out 9 million people, it'll cause the stock market to crash and who knows what else, right? And destroy the economy, destroy people. Disastrous. Absolutely. One person can do that type of thing today. What used to take a whole nation to do in the past, one person can do. That's what technology has done. Technology has extended our abilities. When it's for good, fantastic. I mean, AI today is absolutely amazing. What you can do with AI. I mean, everyone's just talking about AI everywhere you go. It's AI, to use AI. It's like everywhere. They're all talking about AI. But if you see what it can do, and you imagine the same type of technology in the hands of not good people, people with bad intentions, frightening, absolutely frightening. And it almost feels like you have nowhere to go. nowhere to turn because you'll never know who you're dealing with and whether it's a real thing or a fake thing. You can get a video chat with someone whom you think is a relative that you trust. It is actually an AI creation, and they could give you instructions. You'll follow because you believe in it, right? Got to double check things today, triple check things because it's a very insecure world we're living in. But that's what technology has done. It's turned a pogrom into a terrorist attack, and all of a sudden, it changes the whole scope of the thing. What's the difference? Well, I'll show you the difference. Okay, you can see it online for yourself. See, when it's a pogrom, well, I mean, there's not a huge difference because probably you get the same type of speeches because of the way we look at things today in Hashgacha Pratis. We're so far down the road from Mount Sinai in the days of prophecy, but people stand up and rather than say, okay, that's unbridled anti-Semitism. Forget about what they're saying the causes of it are. Forget about whatever they think the world's saying is a justification and rationalization for what they're doing. Just look at what's taking place. The same thing happened, by the way, in World War II. You always hear the comparison to World War II, but let's take a look, right? Why didn't the Jews get nervous when they saw youth in brown shirts goose-stepping down main streets of Germany, of Berlin? And why didn't they get nervous when they saw all these Nazis following a man who wrote Mein Kampf, that basically is the basis of his shita of anti-Semitism and need to destroy the Jewish people? And they made laws to make the place Judenrein or take away all privilege. I mean, Jews were walking around without citizenship for years. For years, they already lost their citizenship. From back in time of Nuremberg, the laws that they passed, and that they stayed. Why didn't people say, no, this is looking a lot like what happened back in the days of Chabaniki, or this is another crusade? Why didn't they do that? Because the Crusades had people on horses, right, with all this fancy, armor and, in the name of their religion, going on religious excursions to kill people who didn't want to join. And the same thing with the Arabs as well. But when the Nazis came along, they didn't look like Cossacks. They didn't look like people who did those type of pogroms in the past. It was more organized. It was more, more efficient, and there was a world war at stake. So they didn't recognize it. We're always looking in the past. We're supposed to learn from the past, but not to the extent that we don't recognize what's going on in the present. And that's what we do. The same thing today, right? We don't have Nazis today per se. I mean, there are Nazis in the world, but we're not looking at a Hitler rising in power, or are we? Well, not the one we used to. He didn't come from Austria. He's not taking over Germany, right? It's another country, a different place of the world, whole different philosophy. He might be Muslim for all we know. Look at Iran. A country that needs to spend so much of its time and money and can afford to and should and has to rebuild itself and save it from going down. It's not what they do. Instead, they spend all this money. Their citizens hate it, and they're suffering because of it. No water in Tehran, and the place is caving in and having a problem, right? But instead, what they do is they use their money to build new weapons to be able to fight against Israel, and to stock up, themselves and their allies, the Hezbollah and the Houthim, that they can go to war against the Jewish people. That's their whole obsession. And we're not even neighbors with them. We're a small, tiny little country, and that's what they're obsessed with in the end. So this is it's a new type of Nazism, a new type of Germany, a new type of Hitler. It's the exact same thing, but in different clothing. Because in every generation, as it says in the Haggadah, they rise up against this, but the clothing changes, and the phrases change, and the focus changes because history is changing. It's not the same as it was last year, but the core of it, right? That's what you have to look at. And if it doesn't, ring a bell, doesn't, hit home that this is the same thing as it was back in the 1930s, then you're in danger. You're in danger because you cannot see what's going on. It's not a way of anti-Semitism. When you stand up and you make statements like, we're going to be strong, we're going to fight back, we're going to show them they can't move us. Yes, they did damage. Yes, they hurt us, but we're not going to run. Well, maybe you should. Maybe That's the message. You see, you can fight against a terrorist. You can fight against a human enemy to some degree, okay? But you can't fight against God. If it's only a terrorist act, like that's all that's going on over here. And even that has to be from the Kodesh Baruch Hu, because the Gemara says that nobody lifts a finger or hurts himself. It's not Nigzar Shemaim. So whether it's a terrorist, whether it's a pogrom, it's all from the Kodesh Baruch Hu. But if it doesn't make a difference what the reason is. The Kodesh Baruch Hu is sending it. Hashem is, that famous joke always comes back to my mind when I think about this idea. But the guy who, there's a flood and the water starts to rise, and someone comes by in the car and says, "Quick, get in the car, I'll take you out before the waters rise up." And he says, "No, I'm waiting for God to save me." The water goes even higher. So now a boat comes by and says, "Quick, in the boat, we'll take you out." No, God, I'm waiting for God to save me. Right, and it keeps going up, and now he's going to the second floor because the water keeps rising, and finally, he's forced to go to the roof, and a helicopter is flying up above looking for people, and says, "Quick, grab the rope, we'll save you because there's no one else who's gonna after this." And he says, "No, I'm waiting for God to save me," and of course the water rises up and drowns him. He dies. He goes to Shemaim, and in Shemaim, finally. He meets up with the Malach, on behalf of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he says, "What is going on? What happened? Here I am, a Bal Emunah, right? Here I am trying to show people how to have faith in God, right? Everyone comes to help me, and I say, no, God's going to, but He didn't save me in the end." Of course, the punchline, which everybody's probably saying to themselves, in their mind right now, who do you think sent the car? And then after that, the boat. And then after that, the helicopter. That was me saving you the entire time. Not just flesh and blood over here. Same thing. Like, who do you think is carrying out these attacks? Who do you think is making all this happen? It hurts, and it's hard to say. I got to tell you, I'm at a tough time doing it, saying things like, well, God was the one who's, you can't say He's not responsible for the Holocaust. You can't say He's not responsible for the Crusade. You can't say He's not responsible for the pogroms. In the time of Chimon, you can't, because they don't have. If you say that, then you're giving power to things other than God. It's like, and that's why, for example, the Gemara says, anyone who loses their temper, it's like avodah zarah. It's like idol worship. You lose your temper. Why? Because if a person hurts you and harms you in some way, they might have been careless, and you may have an obligation to say to them, "Excuse me, you got to be more careful in the future." To give tochacha, to give criticism, you could be, chayav for damages. You have to pay whatever, right? But when you walk away, it's like, okay, God, why did that happen to me? Why did you have that happen to me? Was I hurt? Why did I stub my finger? Why did I do this when this thing, causes pain to me? What am I supposed to learn from this? We said this morning, yesterday morning actually, in the Shir Hayom, right? The Psalm of the day, the end of davening. The Kodesh Baruch Hu gives, he gives musar to the ones that he loves, right? He teaches the one that he loves, gives das to those that that he cares about, because he wants them to improve. So if a person doesn't understand it, it's all from Kodesh Baruch Hu. And Kabbalah, once you start to learn Kabbalah, then it's absolutely clear. There's no discussion about it. Okay, it raises a very hard question. That's one of the reasons why we don't like to say things like this. And the question is, why? Why? How could you allow that to happen? How could 6 million Jews die? To Moshe Rabbeinu, he had the same question, by the way. He saw children being used as mortar in Mitzrayim to build in the walls. So God says, you don't think I'm doing over here? You're questioning my. It's like, it's a little hard. We're told to have rachmanis. We're told to empathize and sympathize. It's kind of hard not to, to have those midos, which you should have, you have to have, and not feel bad about children that you don't know who they are, what their story is and their souls are about, and being used for mortar, right? Or Jews being beaten to death, literally by Egyptians against, having to find straw that doesn't exist, literally killing themselves in the process. So how could you not feel bad about that? So of course Moshe complains, and God says, "I'll tell you what. I'll let 2 survive. 2 of them, there's no accidents, good this specifically, right? But that's a different level of discussion. But so let's 2 survive. And who are the 2 that survived? Dasan and Aviram. They're the 2 babies that Moshe saved, that grew to become his biggest thorns in the desert for 40 years until they finally went down in Parshas Korach. And it's making the point that God knows what he's doing is hard and is harsh. As a reality as the Holocaust is, God was in control every single second. And you have the question as to how is that for our good? How is that, as people will tell you, people have said, and I've heard it said, I heard a certain person by somebody who survived the Holocaust, who got up one day at a public talk. It was not even about the Holocaust per se, but he was stuck on it because he was still suffering some 40 years later, 50 years later, understandably so. No one faulted him for it. But he got up, at a happy talk about Purim and said, God, where was, Rabbi, he was actually saying by God too, but he said, Rabbi, where was God in 1942? That killed the whole discussion. It wasn't about Purim anymore. From that point on, we were dealing with the Holocaust at that time. But it's hard. It's hard. It's harsh. People give birth to children and they die as babies, Rahman Islam, or as young kids, or they're newly married and they go to war and they get killed, they get shot, or something else happens to them and they don't go home again, or they get kidnapped and taken away and die in captivity. Terrible, terrible, hard, harsh realities that cannot be, you can't really, say enough about those things, and cry enough about those things, and you're supposed to, because that's what Kosh Baruch expects from us in the end. That you might not be able to change reality. He's not going to, I'm not going to say to you, why didn't you make the world a better place? The answer is because you wouldn't let me. You didn't want me to, right? If you were trying to do it. The question they'll ask you on Yom Adin is that why did you want to make the world a better place? Why wasn't it important to you? A person can say, well, because God, you and I both know that it wouldn't make a difference anyhow. You'll do what you're going to do. Moshe Rabbeinu witnessed the same thing. The increased slavery, you're going to carry it, no matter what effort I make. Oh, so many times I've tried to save the world and tell people, what had to be done. But you, Kosh Baruch Hu, you stopped me. You somehow interfered in the process. You blocked me from doing it. So what do you want from me? So God says, yeah, that's fine. You're right. And that was necessary, but not because I didn't believe what you were doing. Your desire, your need to fix the world, that's yours. There's a story, Medrash, right? And just yesterday I saw something along these lines, very beautiful idea, but it's a little too complicated to go into right now. But the Medrash says that we'll ask the question: why is it so important that we light the menorah? Why, in the Beis Hamikdash? I mean, the menorah we lit in Hanukkah time is to commemorate the miracle of Hanukkah, but in the Beis Hamikdash we lit the menorah every single day. At least 6 of the candles that went out. The Maravi, the Western one, it burned nonstop. Also part of the miracle of the oil. And why? For 40 years, the Gemara says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu led us through the desert with a pillar of fire at night and a cloud in the daytime, and he controls the sun and the moon and the stars, right? He doesn't need our little lights in the end. And give me one second. The story just comes to mind that I just heard yesterday that's perfect for today, which I'll tell you in one second. But the Medrash says, "Lamaha Devedom." What is this like? It's like a king who has a good friend, but he's poor, right? Now you probably say to yourself, "Well, he's the king and he's poor, so give him money." Okay, it's a mashal. It's a mashal, right? And it says that the king says to his friend, "Listen, I want to come visit you. I want to be chabad you. I want to honor you. So I'm going to come visit you in your home. Go home, tell your wife, prepare yourself, and prepare the home as much as you possibly can for my visit." So he's beside himself because they have almost nothing, right? But the king said, his friend said, so he goes back to his wife, tells his wife, she almost has a heart attack, of course, right? They borrow what they can from their neighbors to clean the place up more than ever before, and they get the whole thing set up, and it's looking nice, but not nearly as nice as it should for the king. And they're waiting and they're waiting. They hear the entourage come in to look at the window. And sure enough, there's the king coming in a big wagon, and there's like horsemen and all dressed in uniforms, and there's torches and flags and trumpet blowers, all right? The whole thing, right? And all of a sudden they feel so humiliated because what they've done is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction, infinite fraction of what the king has already. So in a moment of desperation, they just pack it all up and throw it the back door, right? And now they have nothing set up, and they don't have to do it themselves. And finally, the king comes, knocks on the door. They open the door, and the king comes in and greets his friend and looks around and says, "I don't understand. I told you to prepare for me. I'm coming. I am the king. I understand you don't have much, but whatever you had would have been honorable because you've done the best you can." Right? And the man says, "To tell you the truth, we had done the best we could. It was actually quite nice, but when we saw what the king was coming with, it was just so humiliating that we threw it out the back door." And the king says, he says, "No, you don't understand. He said, all of this is not mine. This is my office. This is what I have to have because I'm the king. Does it belong to me? No, it belongs to the kingdom." Right? They do this because of the position that I have, not because of who I am as a person. But when you prepared this place for me as a friend, as a respected, as for me, right? That means the world to me, as little as it might have been. So Kodesh Baruch Hu says to the Jewish people, he says, the sun, the moon, the stars, I made all that stuff. I did that. You weren't involved in that at all, right? And the cloud and the pillar of fire, it's all me, right? It's me to you in the end. But when you light the menorah, you clean it out and you fill it up and you light it. I've come to enjoy it. I've come to enjoy the next day sitting down and taking the time and refilling the jars and getting it all set up early in advance so it's ready, no rushing at the last second, because it feels like it's part of the midst of the lighting itself, and it's a gift from me back to Kodesh Baruch Hu, my kavanah, my ratzon, my will. That's what the Kodesh Baruch Hu is looking for. That's so fundamental that Kabbalah explains that what took place at the highest levels that most of us have never even heard of before in the spheres is all for the sake of what's called batata, that what we initiate from below. Success, no success, that's up to God. That's up to history. That's up to the needs of creation. But the ratzon that we develop, the care that we have, that's on us. That's what we have to ourselves do. So yeah, you have to feel and you want, but at the end of the day, whatever goes wrong, whatever's happening, whatever bad, it's not automatic. It's not because it's a failure in creation, not because God didn't have it all worked out. You have buildings that collapse in history, right? Unfortunately, the architects, the engineers, they made a mistake. For some reason, they didn't calculate something, or someone cut corners, whatever the case. But we're humans. As much as we're getting better and better because of all the computers and the technology and the materials. But nonetheless, mistakes still do happen. Bridges still do collapse because of certain shortcomings. But not God. His creation is perfect. Oh, you don't like it? You would do it differently. You would take away all the bad stuff. You would take away all the crises, all the collapses, all the stuff that goes wrong, all the evil people. Yeah, one day that's the way the world's going to be. But for some reason, this is the way the world has to be. It's progressing towards a specific goal. That's what it's all about. It's about this goal that God has and has had the entire time from the beginning to the end, and nothing is off track, no matter how much it looks like that. The Gra himself says, he says that especially in the end of days, and by the way, he called it already the final generation in his time, which is the end of the 1700s, which is the 18th century, right? And we're like 200 years down the road. We're all back in Israel already. He was starting Kibbutz Galius. We didn't have control of the land yet, but he sent Jews back. His students went back to Israel to start building up the land that we now live in, because of them back at that time. They were the forebears and the ones who got things going against the worst conditions, and we're now enjoying the best of conditions, aside from our enemies around us. But this is all part of that plan. I mean, come on, where are we in history? A plug. Well, actually, I wanted to tell that little story. Someone told me a story yesterday. It's a true story. Somebody who was unfortunately was killed. A soldier was killed in Gaza. I think in the last year or so, And my friend was actually, I think they had I think maybe it was a year or something like that. They had in New York. He was from New Jersey originally, apparently, and and they told us that his widow has told the rabbi the story about her husband who grew up in New Jersey, how when he was about 15 years of age and he was lighting his menorah, it was actually the 25th of December, right? Hanukkah that year overlapped, which does happen sometimes, right? And or at least it didn't actually I don't actually truth I don't even know it's the 25th of December because the truth is they put the lights up even before that. So it could have been at any time, within that period of time that they put the lights up. But as he's lighting the menorah, the small little menorah, he looks around at the street, and he's living in a street with a lot of non-Jews, and they have all their Christmas lights up. And he says, it's like a Rahmanis, like this little menorah we're lighting, and maybe there's a couple, the family puts a couple, but the amount of light that the menorah casts, it's not like red, green, pink, all these different lights they put up all over the entire house. We don't put up a menorah in every corner of the house. We're by the door, by the gate where you can see they're presuming Nisa, but they light the whole street up with everything. And he's thinking, what a Rahmanas. It's like, what a, like Nebuch. This is this mitzvah, we're doing it so small. He's only 15 years of age, right? And he said, the whole religion's kind of like that. Everything's like second best, second, it's not nearly compared to what others do in the world. And as he was thinking this, there was a blackout on the street, and every single house lost electricity, including theirs, right? The only source of light was his menorah. Now, you don't get hashgacha pratis like that all the time. That's a Kodesh Baruch Hu at Chanukah time saying, I hear you, I'm going to show you something, right? It's not the way it seems. It's not what you think. You're going by what it looks like on the surface. You're seeing what's on this. You're used to seeing the things on the surface, but think into it, look deeper, right? Because all that light, right, as the Madrash says, all that pomp and pageantry that comes with me every town I go to, klum, means nothing to me. Nothing. That little, bit you did to clean up your house, that little menorah, that's what the Madrash says. That menorah, that little menorah you light, the sun, the moon, the stars, nothing compared to your menorah. Because of the ratzah, because of what you're thinking, what it means, and what you're trying to prove with it. Yeah, that's, the Kodesh Baruch Hu says, is everything to me. So everything by definition is part of this message. And here we are, 5786. I mean, I'm not going to go through the whole cheshbon again. I just finished publishing a brand new book. It's called What Now? It's available on Amazon. All about this. It's all about this. You'll find repetition, but deeper. It goes further. Discusses ideas, other aspects of this. The main point of the book is like, what now? We're at these crossroads of history. The other books I wrote in the past, the anti-Semitism wasn't as bad yet. The world wasn't the way it was. Something before October 7th. Now, with the new input, with all what's going on, it's a little more firmer perspective. But the theme has stayed the same. Here we are at the end of history. What do you think God's trying to say? He's telling the Jews of Australia or Canada or America, be careful. You've got enemies out there, and they're looking to damage you, and they have the will to do it. And I let them do it because it wasn't for me. They couldn't, because in the past, I stopped them. How many times did we almost have a terrorist attack that didn't get carried, didn't go through because somehow Maxi gets stopped? But not anymore. These things are happening now, right? But hunker down. Fortify yourselves. Be stronger. Strengthen your will. You tell those people you're not going anywhere. You're staying put because you are the Jewish people. You think that's God's message at this stage of history? Well, coronavirus wasn't enough to teach you that you think you can just get on an airplane and travel. You have an apartment to Israel. Great, fantastic. But you're in New York, you're New Jersey, someplace else. And you'll just get an airplane just like that when you want to because you have to and get out? Maybe yes, maybe no. A lot of people could not get transportation out of Europe. They wanted to go, they were ready to go, but it's too late to go. It's all hashgacha pratis. I'm not questioning that. Or the psach halacha of the Gedolei Dor. Because you know something? The messages are still the messages. You can still say that there was a gezerah, as they said, on the Jews of Europe to go through what they went through, but that doesn't mean that we can't learn from the nine generation because maybe gezerah is different. Maybe the decree is different. Maybe we are meant to survive. So therefore, we have to learn from it. You can learn from people's mistakes, even if they couldn't, but we can. How we care, what we think about, how we respond to the situation. But what is God saying to us at this stage of history? What do you think he's saying with all these things, all this anti-Semitism? Well, it's right there in the Chumash, right? Just go back to the beginning, right? And it's like a broken record. And everyone watching tonight is the choir, but this gets watched by other people too. And some of it gets sent to other people who are not part of the choir per se. And I hear from those people sometimes, and not in the nicest of terms. But it has to be said. Yaakov Avinu, he's living with Lavan. He's a terrible anti-Semite. He wants to destroy. We see it. We just read the story. You understand? Yeah, Lavan wanted to kill Yaakov, and Aram he wanted to kill. Oh, okay, fine. It's like no, it's not just take another sip of coffee. No, that's serious. We live with a murderous father-in-law. I mean, some father-in-laws would like to kill their son-in-law sometimes, but not that way. Not like that, figuratively speaking. But he really wanted to do it. And he tried, and he tried to cheat him the entire time, and Lavan survived. I mean, Yaakov survived Lavan and his brothers-in-law, But the moment that Yaakov saw a change, not a big change, teensy change, small one, a very small change. The brothers-in-law said some not nice things, but might constitute a blood libel to some degree, right? And Lavan didn't smile exactly the same way he did yesterday. What about the fact that maybe he had indigestion? Maybe he got some bad news. Maybe one of his sheep died. And Yaakov just said, no. You know why? Because Yaakov didn't want to be there. Yaakov knew it was temporary. Yaakov lived with one foot in and one foot out for 20 years. He lived that way. He knew this was not a home. He was willing to go back when the time was right. So as a result of everything he could see was from that perspective. And he was protected. And he knew that protection was not because Lavan was civil. He was not. Even Rachel told him he's not. You'll meet your match over here. Yaakov says, I can deal with it. I've already dealt with Esav. Eliphaz, let's see, Lavan, as they say, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Right? So at the end, the moment he saw a change, a small little change, he took it as a message from God. And he took it as a message from God that said, it is time to go home. Not strengthen yourself, be more aware, hire a bodyguard, maybe, track Laban's, wherever he goes to know where he is at any point in time, put a video camera up at your front doors like that, right? Ask for extra police security. No, that wasn't it. He knew that up until that point in time, the reason why everything was so good or good enough was because Baruch Hu made it that way. God was protecting us, not because they were nice to us, because he made them nice to us. He made it that way. He made them act that way towards us. So therefore, if it's starting to change, it means he's no longer doing the same thing. But if he's not doing it, so why? God's, on a coffee break, takes a vacation once in a while, doesn't care all the time? No, not by Kodesh Baruch Hu, never that. So what is it then? It's a message. Kodesh Baruch Hu's way of telling us, communicating, while it's still safe, while we still can, while it's still, possible to go on our terms. Yaakov left on his terms, right? But you stay too long, and we see, and over and over again, we learn, we lose more and more control of the situation, till eventually we can't leave on our terms whatsoever, only on their terms in the end. Because that's how long it took for the conversation to make a point to us. So, you don't want to call it a pogrom and learn the message from the past and what we're supposed to get of it and ask the question what God's saying to us. You can. But then your life is in your own hands. You bear responsibility. You stand up and you tell your tzibur, you tell your congregation, we have to become stronger. We're going to dig in here. We're not going to go anywhere, right? We're going to watch our enemy and make sure they can't get to us. that's your responsibility now. That's in your hands. You just took, right, onto your shoulders the lives of everybody else around you because they listen to you, they respect you. And you just said that. But if you tell the people, I remember one video, still this very day during coronavirus, when the plane shut down and people couldn't come to Israel unless you were an Israeli citizen, mamash citizen, and had to get back home, right? People would go in, they make these videos that said, crying, right? Maybe we didn't understand. Maybe we took it for granted. We thought we could always go when we wanted to, but maybe it's not that way at all. And maybe we should think about this being the end of the exile. So Kodesh Baruch Hu let up. He lifted it. And of course, what did we do? Went right back to sleep. Right. Just, that must be Hashem saying to us that that's not the message. You can't stay because now you can fly again. No, that's not the way God works. Not through history. Not then, not today. He's generous. He doesn't lower the boom completely until way down the road. But in the meantime, the short run, he gives us a chance to see what he's saying, to think about it, to contemplate it, to take it to heart, to push away the biases and say, no, aside from all my shtick and my, whatever I'm doing that makes me want to stay put, and I shouldn't, what could this message really be saying? And then to implement it. But we only have so much time to do that. And that's clearly, the message today is we're running out of that time very fast, if we even have that much left at all. So, call what you will, any other name, any other place, still the same thing. A message from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the exile's over. It is time to at least think about going home. So,